In July of 2026, a few weeks after the Toronto Maple Leafs drafted him, Alexander Bilecki stood on a pitcher's mound at the Rogers Center and threw a baseball. He was not doing a bit. The pitches were good. They were good because he is a genuinely accomplished baseball player who happened to spend the previous 3 months winning a Memorial Cup on skates. And because there is a version of his life, not a distant one, in which the mound was the job and the hockey rink was the hobby. One asks, and it is the only one in this video. There is a Montreal version of this channel. I would like the Toronto one to be bigger. Subscribing is how that happens. That is the whole request. That version was live until about 3 years ago. Bilecki played for Team Ontario as a dual threat pitcher and outfielder. He is a switch hitter. His fastball has been clocked north of 80 miles an hour. Those are not the credentials of a kid who plays ball in the summer for fun. That is a real athletic future in a completely different sport, and at some point somebody has to choose. He has described the decision plainly. He had to pick one. He thought he was a bit better at hockey, and he has not really looked back, so he picked hockey. Then Kitchener won the Memorial Cup for the first time in 23 years, and Toronto called his name 60th overall. This video is about what the other sport left behind in him, because it is not nothing, and NHL teams have gotten much more deliberate about looking for it. First, the hockey ledger, because the counterfactual only means something if the real timeline is real. Alexander Bilecki is a left-shot defenseman from Mississauga, Ontario, 6'2", 18 years old, 2 seasons with the Kitchener Rangers of the Ontario Hockey League. In 2025-26, he put up 9 goals and 29 points in 66 regular season games from the blue line. Solid, not spectacular. Then the postseason arrived and he doubled his rate, 2 goals and 11 points in 18 OHL playoff games. At the Memorial Cup itself, 3 assists and a +5 rating in 4 appearances, tied for the 3rd most points by any defenseman in the tournament. Kitchener beat the Everett Silvertips to win it. After the draft, Bilecki summed himself up in 3 words that scouts write down. "I'm a winner." Shout now, the part that actually interests me. What transfers? The lazy answer is athleticism, which explains nothing. The specific answer is more useful. And it comes in 3 pieces. The first is rotational power. A pitching delivery and a slapshot are the same physical event wearing different clothes. Both start from the ground, drive through the hips, sequence up through the trunk, and release through an extended arm at the last possible instant. Coaches call it a kinetic chain, and the whole thing lives or dies on timing. The energy has to arrive at the hand exactly when the hand needs it. A teenager who has thrown 80 miles an hour has already built and rehearsed that sequence thousands of times on the other side of his body under pressure. The second is eye tracking. Hitting a baseball is broadly agreed to be the hardest perceptual task in mainstream sport. A small object arriving in under half a second and the decision to swing gets made before the ball is halfway there. A switch hitter has done it from both sides. That is a trained visual system, and reading a puck off a stick blade at the blue line is the same skill pointed at a different object. The third one matters most and gets discussed least. Playing 2 sports through your teens means you are never doing the same repetitive motion year-round, and single sport specialization before adulthood is associated with higher overuse injury rates and, in a lot of programs, with earlier burnout. It also builds a broader motor library. Athletes who have solved movement problems in more than one sport tend to adapt faster when a coach asks them to solve a new one. That is why "he was a serious baseball player" appears in scouting reports as a positive rather than a curiosity. Give me your take before I get to the hard part. Which second sport do you think produces the best hockey players? Baseball, lacrosse, soccer, or tennis? Lacrosse is the traditional answer in Canada, and I do not think it is obviously right. Make your case below. Now, the honest problems, because the story is charming and the projection is not automatic. 29 points in 66 games is a modest offensive season for a defenseman drafted in the 2nd round. The scouting consensus on him is smooth skating and two-way. A compliment that is also a warning, because two-way frequently means a player has no elite dimension in either direction, and an 18-game playoff surge is 18 games. Kitchener was a championship team, and championship teams flatter everyone attached to them, particularly defensemen who get to play with a lead. There is also a version of the 2-sport story that ends badly. Divided attention through the developmental years can mean fewer hockey repetitions than the players he will be competing against for a roster spot, and some of those players have been doing nothing but this since they were 9. The advantage of a broad motor library is real, so is the disadvantage of a shorter hockey resume, but here is the counter, and it is specific to the position he plays. Defensemen are not drafted for what they did at 18. They are drafted for the rate at which they are still improving because, as anyone who follows the position knows, defense is learned late and the curve is long, which makes the relevant question not how many points did he score, but how much runway is left. And this is where the baseball years stop being a fun fact and start being an argument. Bilecki spent his developmental years splitting time between two demanding sports and still reached the second round of an NHL draft on a Memorial Cup winner as a defenseman playing meaningful minutes. Every hour he spent on a mound was an hour not spent on the ice, and he arrived at the same place anyway. Now he has stopped splitting. For the first time in his life, all of it goes into one sport. That is the actual bet Toronto made at pick 60, not on 9 goals, on the fact that the player who produced them has never once trained like a full-time hockey player, and is about to start. Whether that pays off is genuinely unknown. Plenty of prospects have full attention and go nowhere with it, but of all the things a team can buy in the second round, unused runway is among the more defensible, so tell me what you think the mound gave him. Was picking hockey the right call, or did Alexander Bilecki walk away from the better career? And if you had a kid with an 80-mile-an-hour fastball and a Memorial Cup ring, which sport would you have pushed? I read every comment on these. Essas ideias hier to get the seas it says totis te. Deskager. A few weeks after Toronto drafted him 60th overall in 2026, Alexander Bilecki threw pitches at the Rogers Center, and they were good because he is a legitimate baseball player who competed for Team Ontario as a dual-threat pitcher and outfielder, throws over 80 mm/p, and switch hits. He had to choose between the two sports. He chose hockey and then won a Memorial Cup with the Kitchener Rangers, their first in 23 years. This video is about what the abandoned sport left behind, the shared kinetic chain between a pitching delivery and a slapshot, why a switch hitter's eye tracking transfers to reading a puck, and why single sport specialization before adulthood is treated as a risk rather than an advantage by development staff. Also covered honestly, why 9 goals and 29 points in 66 games is a modest draft year line, why smooth skating two-way defenseman is a compliment that doubles as a warning, and why the real thing Toronto bought at pick 60 is unused runway, a player who has never trained full-time at this sport and is about to start. Kitchener beat the Everett Silvertips for the Memorial Cup. Bilecki's own summary after the draft. I'm a winner. Toronto Maple Leafs prospect analysis. No game footage is used. All visuals are AI-generated stills. This video contains AI-generated narration and imagery.